Hello, hi everyone. Welcome. It's been pretty good. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's awesome to be here at this fine Sunday for FANIME. We do appreciate everybody's time here. Ooh, let's make sure that people can see our faces. Let's make sure people can see our faces. Let me troubleshoot real quick, guys, so that way.
Our faces.
There we go. All right. So, oh, it does look like our faces aren't showing up, so it's okay. So we'll just toggle between both things.
Who needs to see our faces when they can hear our beautiful voices?
Who needs to see our faces when they can see our beautiful, loud, proud voices?
We're just gonna keep running.
We're just gonna keep running with it. So anyway, welcome to Lady Blerds Sings the Blues. I will actually definitely show our faces real quick for you guys for reference. I am sometimes V.
I'm Kylie Too Smart.
And we are here to give you guys a very nice but also informative presentation on representation matters, how the Black community independently influenced the true development of inclusive content in current day anime and gaming fandoms. This is something that has been very important for us to talk about because, you know, in order for us to be seen in these spaces, we got to be making the space. So what do you think about that, Kylie?
I think that's incredible. And I think it's also something that mainly people don't actually think about. It's one of those things where it's like, if it doesn't affect you personally, you don't think about it. But there's a lot of ways in which this does affect you personally, and you just don't know.
Yeah,
so,
it
representation.
Representation.
Yeah.
Representation.
For me,
respect. Respect us. Yeah.
It means being able to enjoy something, to enjoy a fandom, and also be able to see yourself reflected back in it. Whenever you appreciate, I appreciate the heck out of anime. I appreciate all the different archetypes, the tropes, that hero character.
That's right. You know, he started from the bottom and now he's here. Good job, Naruto. Now he's here.
Good job. But you know, you fall in love with these characters and you want to be able, you resonate with these characters, right? And then you want to be able to see yourself reflected as well. And it kind of sucks knowing, especially if you're a person of color, whatever type of genre that you're into, that you're going to be confronted with some negative stereotypes, especially coming from communities that don't necessarily have a lot of exposure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to be very, very clear, this is it's not going to be like some nice, fluffy, just cotton candy conversation. This is actually going to hit some places where it might be a little uncomfortable, but this is important because in order for us to thrive and overcome, we got to get uncomfortable and step up to the plate. So,
and it's all love. We are here at FANIME because we love FANIME. It's my first FANIME.
It's her first FANIME.
My very first one.
First one.
And
holy moly! In the chat, just congratulates Kylie for just making it here. She moved from Texas to Cali. I said Cali.
Ooh.
All right, Cali, Bay Area. So anyway, so she came here and she's like, oh, I want to check out all the things. And then the pandemic hit, and so now this is her first experience with coming to this convention. While I've known all of y'all for almost 10 years here, and I know what it's like to be seen in these spaces, and also as much as I have memorable times at FANIME, I love FANIME. FANIME has done a great job, even giving us a platform to talk about this.
Right? Hi, we're here.
Yeah, we are here talking about this. So thank you, panels department, for even having us here. This is a huge, big step into talking and making changes. But also sometimes the con goers, I'm not gonna lie, I love y'all, but we gotta do better. We gotta do better.
It happens online, it happens in real space.
Yeah.
Most of my interactions have been online, especially having this platform. This con is online. I meet and get introduced to a bunch of different cosplayers online. Instagram has been my link for how I find people and all these content creators. So let's talk about what representation means online for a sec.
Yeah, and let's talk about, creating these conversations matters. So we're not the only ones just bringing these up.
No, we can't be.
Absolutely not. So here's a headline. This Black cosplayer is breaking racial boundaries of ... I can give you guys the whole thing here.
It can't happen that often, right?
Right? It can't happen. Does it happen often? Right? Is this the only thing? I see Kira Please. Also, shout outs to Kira Please. She's killing it. Mainstream. But yeah, we're always breaking something to make room for ourselves here. So if it's not just us, there's other stories that happen on a regular basis. And they just keep happening on a regular basis. Oh my gosh, look at all these headlines.
Black people in anime?
Oh my gosh, this is less
Racism in cosplay.
1.5% 1% of things that happen to us, because I'm not going to give you guys a full 100. It happens in the news.
Hinata isn't black.
So
Black today.
she's going to be black today. So like, yeah, this is important for us to address, because I mean, like I said, addressing it brings change, brings empathy, brings things for us to, you know, to be better, essentially. And I know those who are listening today, you guys really care about this, and we care about making sure that people are feeling seen.
You guys are down with the cause.
Down with the cause.
But
So,
also,
oh boy.
Well,
the
cause.
The cause. What's
the cause
up?
and the reason.
And the reason.
Mr. Fofo, what's up? We're not going to talk about you right now.
We're not going to talk about you right now, but we will address you in a second, because this is a big deal. Mr. Popo is literally the poster child of why we're talking about this.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so like some things that we're going to cover today, we're going to cover like the historical context and problematic portrayals. We're going to address the why do we care-isms, like, you know, like, why are you here? Why do you care? Like, why should we bring this to a public platform? And then also ways that we've been overcoming.
Yes. So first of all, historic context is really important. I know a lot of people are going to get on here, like my mom included. She was just like, why are you guys talking about Blackness in anime when anime is Japanese? And so it really was something that I had to connect the dots for myself and then also for her.
Mm-hmm.
Where in the world Japan was when we started getting these images of Black people, and then also the relationships globally, like what's going on. So when you have a population that doesn't necessarily have a lot of Black people, the representations that you do have become even that much more important, because you don't have anything else to compare it to.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so like 16th century Japan is when you started getting like people from Africa being introduced. And then later in the 18th century, you know, you're starting to have like a nation, you have Imperial Japan. So now we're starting to have colonies, and we're starting to see propaganda as the first images of people of color and the first expressions of Blackness coming out of Japan, and also then relating to the images coming out of America.
Absolutely.
So problematic portrayals are important in history, because it's how, you know, you base the grounds for your future.
And we gotta say it's an issue. Like it is an issue. Like it's problematic because it's an issue, and it's encompassing a larger problem. So let's go ahead and talk about some historical contextual things with animation. So look at how animation has evolved. I mean, first of all, let's give it a pause to Japanese animation. This is not sarcasm, it's truth. Like you guys have done a really, like, animation in itself has grown from looking like, you know, what you guys see here is Katsuro Shashin, like just as a little quick sample of what animation looked like back then. And then as you kind of go through the years, like you can see how things have like developed.
Like the version of 8-bit.
Yeah.
Now in video games, like, can you imagine?
Right? The version of 8-bit, yeah. And so like, yeah, we can see like how, you know, things have like progressed, and like how characters went from looking like, you know, more cartoonish to more like having like, you know, different like I would say experimenting past just like the normal like human look to like, you know, now what we call anime, like Japanese anime. So like it's really cool to see that progression. And then, you know, as a joke, we're applauding, but like I hope we're not upsetting anybody by that episode of, you know, that show that made me really mad at the end of the series, but let's keep going. But
I haven't seen it yet, but I was told to clap.
And
so I did.
She doesn't understand.
She wasn't ready.
She wasn't ready. But let's move along to this.
Oh, definitely wasn't ready for this slide. This slide's a heavy slide for me to even just look at, but it drives home the point.
So let's evaluate. I'm going to go back real quick just so that you guys can see the previous slide. Like, look at this previous slide really quick, study it. Give yourself a second to just like, you know, give yourself like, okay, what are the features here? What have they put up on here intentionally, blah, blah, blah. Like there is a reason why we have went from here to focusing on Black characters. And I mean, we wouldn't be here if we weren't talking about Black characters. So, you know, recently, if you don't mind me going backwards, Kylie, you can see like what Japanese animation looks like now. We're very familiar with those who are probably maybe within the same generation as us, the 1990s anime going to current day. And so we see these characters becoming more canon, but like look back at the 1900s, not really a lot of presence in characters. We struggled to try to find something. And then once you go into the 1930s, like you see these minstrelsisms like being applied to Black characters. Now the minstrelsisms are not just like, you know, like, oh, the characters are just there, you know, like you have your Black character, so what's the problem? No, the issue is like they don't look like Black people.
Well, also, when we talk about minstrel, we're not actually talking about portrayals of Black people. What we're talking is about white entertainers who use blackface to mimic Black people, and that is the imagery that we are seeing in cartoons. So what we're seeing is not meant to be portrayals of realistic whole individuals. It is supposed to be broken down to like the barest minimum and basically denigration of what it means to be Black.
Right. Yeah. And so like, you know, these are depictions that were definitely within the Jim Crow era.
Yeah.
And like these weren't depictions to make us feel like human. These were depictions to keep us in an animal state. As you can see in 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, like those characters were not human. Like you have a mole, you have a spider, and then you have some sort of like animal savage character that isn't really a Black person, but it's more so just another like NPCism of a greater group that seems like they're there to hurt you or just like, you know, take out, like, you know, just attack you and all that stuff. And it's an ambiguous way of saying that, like, you know, people are a threat. And so, you know, and like, let's keep going with this, like 1940s, like there's a pork pie hat on the spider with some minstrelsism looks. And Pork Pie Hat is a famous jazz tune by Lester Young, where, like, you know, Black people wore pork pie hats back then. And
they had the pork pie hat.
Yeah, they had them.
So this is the thing, like we see it now too, when people talk about, you know, appropriating culture. So you'll pick and choose which items of that culture you think would make a good representation or would be easily recognizable. So like picking a hat, a specific style of hat, or picking a specific hairstyle. A lot of times in the earlier days, it was just like they only had one hairstyle for Black people.
Or no hairstyle.
Or no hairstyle, no texture, or, you know, they only have one type of lips or one type of nose.
They would put the mammy characters in bonnets because it's like, that's easier than drawing Black hair. Like, you know, you've seen it in like Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry. Even like with Tom and Jerry, you just see the legs. I mean, that was also with a lot of the people in there. But my whole point.
The whole point is that we weren't actually like depicted as characters in their own rights until much later, like, which I guess for us is like recent 1970s onwards. And even 1970s was a struggle because what you had was that hyper masculine caricature again, where now it's like, okay, we're not animals, but we're really aggressive, we're loud. You know, if you see
we're tough love
in the show, it's gonna be like some kind of gangsta stuff is happening. Like it's you didn't see also like dark-skinned women portrayed
not
in any
at
kind
all
of positive
the
light.
first dark-skinned woman I saw portrayed in animation was that Black woman in Cowboy Bebop. That was the first time, and she was beautiful, and she was like Foxy Brown, like show enough, like, you know, I was ready for her. And then like, but that was the only time I've ever really seen a dark complected Black woman on animation. And even then, like it's a huge jump because she looked beautiful. Like she kind of reminded me of Grace Jones a little bit.
Yes.
But at the same time, like she was still a drug dealer, which is also very problematic. Like why was she why was she there, but then her role was to be a one-time character in this series as a drug dealer?
So that's kind of like, I love Cowboy Bebop. I really do. There's so many Black influences in that show, just from the music, from the art style, from the stories that are being told. But the thing is, it's the story that's being told.
It's the story that's
bounty
being told.
hunter. We already know. You already know. Like he's a bounty hunter. The people that he's going to be interacting with most likely is going to be criminals because that's what he's doing. That's his jam. So there's some aspects of shows where I try not to internalize it too much, but it does also kind of feel a little gaslighty in anime sometimes, where it's just like, I really want to root for this. Yeah. And it makes me feel like, do I have to second question some of the criticisms that I have of a show?
And we take things that we see on media like with a huge influence. Like I don't want to say grain of salt, but we usually see it and we're like, okay, if there's a makeup ad and I see this girl wearing makeup, I'm like, great. But if I see a makeup ad with a white woman on there who doesn't have the same skin as me, I'm like, I don't know if that product's going to work for me. That's always the thing inside the household where it's like, if I see a commercial and I'm like, ooh, I want to try that. Remember that like dumb braid thing where where it twists your hair and you're like, ooh, that looks like a great way to do Bronx braids. And then my mama's like, no, girl, that's not going to work for your hair. I'm like, but it worked for hers. I'm like, no, you don't understand. And that was just like the small thing that was like, sometimes when we see things, like they may not articulate to us, but what we see that may articulate to us, we'll take it because we're like, oh, maybe that's what we're supposed to be. And when we're depicted as drug dealers, you know, maybe it's like, oh, is that our path in life? So it gives a bigger picture of what animation has done to really, like, you know, make us depicted. But I mean, like depictions.
No, I think
so
we've gotten a lot better though.
Yeah, we have. Like there's now, like in current animation now, there's from masculine Black characters, there's now a duality of in multiple, I don't even want to say duality, but now Black characters, you can start seeing their actual hair. Like shout outs to Bleach for having that one the Serite, it's that guy from the Serite. If someone's listening, please like type the name in the chat, please. But you know, like he had like, you know, I can't remember if it was twists or dreads, but like he had that in there, so it gave some like versatility to those characters. You know, in this dot hack show right here, you can see that there is a woman character who looks more beautiful. She doesn't look like masculine and all that stuff. Oh yeah, it's Kaname. Thank you, Karen. Oh, we got some family in the chat. What's up, Karen? See you from Monterey. That's right. And then thank you, Gwen, for like, you know, reinforcing that and knowing who I am talking about. So yeah, like, but yeah, like it's just really important to like, you know, really take note of these things that it took us so late in animation to realize this, right? So if we go back to the previous slide, women were always beautiful, characters were already the heroes, the protagonists, but it took us so long to just be the protagonist or maybe a main character. And like, let's talk about, you know, the bigger pictures of like where we were in history. Like, you know, 1894, like that's where the Gollywog looks started to happen. 1920 with the Harlem Renaissance, so the pork pie hat has something to do with that. And then, you know, then in the 1950s, the mid 1950s is when the civil rights movement started to happen. So like, you know, and I'm not saying that these movements were like, we got to fix anime. They were more focused on making sure that there was no more segregated establishments and making sure that Black children could go to school without being harassed, right? But, you know, with that being said, like, you know, when things are trending, all other things will ripple into change. So it's like, it's not the only thing, like, you know, bigger movements will go into smaller sectors, right?
Yes, I mean, so I saw in the comments somebody had brought up Yasuke. Cruz, thank you for bringing up Yasuke as a good Black character. I don't think we would have had something like Yasuke happening if we didn't have Black Lives Matter movement, if we didn't have this conversation that's coming around with George Floyd, you know, if we didn't have these running at the forefront and people talking about Black creatives and talking about Black people being people and having multiple, you know, facets to themselves and multiple passions. And so to see a project like Yasuke, like he's done beautifully. I really wish that they had like streamlined and actually got some of the more like historical context in there, because it really felt to me like somebody was just a massive fan of anime and was like, let's do all of the tropes, do all of the things, and really, well, I mean, you gotta keep it
interesting, right?
I mean, you know, like to me, like I was just so stoked with that, and that's the whole point, right? You got to keep it interesting. So for other people, like to them, seeing Yasuke might not be as life changing to them. You know, these younger generations, they are used to seeing Black anime characters, but for me, seeing Yasuke, it was really like I'd never seen someone do this before. And so it just kind of like makes the whole point of why it's so important to have representation and like look at how these characters are developing. And I just want to shout out all those people who are making it happen for themselves. It's important.
Yeah, this is definitely important. And like, you know, we keep emphasizing the women thing because like, I mean, look at us, we're women, and we're women who are Black, and we were women who want to see more light to our roles. And so, and I want to give a huge shout out to this woman. Her name is Janelle Benjamin. I found her randomly on LinkedIn. So like, shout out for that cold take on like, just letting us use some of your content to kind of just talk about, the masculinity trope with Black women. Now, Kylie and I, we are lighter complected. We're half Black. Kylie has, her father's Black, whereas my mother is Black. And so we don't face the degree of colorism the same way that dark or complected women face. And so when we see darker complected women like facing all these challenges, we have to take what their concerns seriously, because it's always something about being hypermasculine, something about being androgynous, something about not being respected or beautified the same way that lighter complected women are. And so there was this thing that we saw on LinkedIn where take a look at this graphic. So we have, the whole point of this graphic was to advocate for gender pronouns and saying that there's more than just the binary. And we are team non-binary. We are team there's more than just 3, 4, 5 genders. Like genders are one of those things that
it's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum. So we get it, and also we understand feminine presenting, and it's all those things. Like I know I'm she, her, and I believe Kylie, you are.
So for me, I'm pretty fluid. For me, it doesn't matter the pronouns that you use, as long as you respect me as a person. And it also doesn't matter to me what I'm wearing. If someone mistakenly calls me he, it doesn't matter. If someone calls me she, it doesn't really matter. So it's just however you're perceiving me, it doesn't matter as long as you're treating me well.
Yeah, but we noticed on this graphic, going back to here, where there was a feminine presenting Black woman on this graphic. She's the only Black woman.
Black woman on there.
Yeah, there's a spectrum of colors, and I know it's getting up to Pride, so it's also a rainbow. So please bear with us as we're explaining this. But they're the only dark-skinned person in this graphic, and they are considered they, them. And it's why didn't we make the assumption that they were they, them? Why couldn't they have been she, her, or he, him? And also with don't get me wrong, earrings are a fluid thing, but it was one of those things where it was just really bothersome, because it's one of those things how come darker skinned women can't be a she, her? How come we couldn't reverse the effect where there is the magenta colored she, her, while there is the purple they, them? Why couldn't they have a different role, just to strengthen the argument with this graphic? And so I don't mean to read off of the PowerPoint, but Janelle made a really good point. It's I see the only obvious Black person being deintegrated to a natural shade of blue, but that's not really what gets me. It's the Black person couldn't be a she, her as well. Why am I bothered when I support the transgender community and the rights of the people to be non-binary? Black women are always contrasted with white women as not being feminine enough.
Michelle Obama.
The tropes about us make us strong, independent, manless, and almost masculine. I found myself wondering why they couldn't have been a woman who identifies with the sex that they were assigned with at birth. They are one of two in a dress and the only one wearing earrings. Maybe those are my biases I need to overcome. Certainly, our clothing choices shouldn't define us, but maybe the artist needs to wake up to ways in which stereotypes about Black women are reinforced by this image. So she has a really good, prompt there, just, making us think beyond.
So I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw this and Veronica was telling me about this article, I probably, like many of you, was I don't really see a problem with the graphic. And it wasn't until I really started thinking about representation and why it is so important, I started picking apart more and more things about this image. And that's when it really hit me. It's the subtle ways, because at first you are willing to accept something, an image, when you see it, firsthand, before you actually think about it. And it did take me a second to think about this and really understand where Janelle's coming from. And now I agree.
Yeah. So it definitely falls into animation. I mean, this is not Japanese animation per se. This was probably a graphic design artist, someone who does this, whether they're a content creator for their community job, whatever the case may be. I don't know who the original artist is, so I do want to give that disclaimer. I'm so sorry to just grab your stuff and just be like, hey, what about this? But it's really important to address these things. And I hope you take this with a means of like just growth. Like, we're not trying to say you're a bad person. The intent here was a beautiful intent. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, it's the fact that we have to make sure that we get all these internal biases and bring them to the table. So that way we're making it obvious, so we influence change. So moving along. Oh my God.
Oh, Mr. Popo, it's still not your turn.
What are you doing here? You're so 1970s.
Oh,
Wah, wah, wah. Don't worry, we'll get to Mr. Popo. I promise that we are not just using him as entertainment. There is a reason why we want to talk about Mr. Popo.
all the reasons.
All the reasons. So moving along. So FANIME, let's talk about FANIME a little bit, and I'm actually going to stop the share. I'll give you guys a quick sneak peek with this one, but we'll go back to that in a second. So not all spaces are welcoming, and this is why we're addressing this. I want to shout out to All Podcast Matter, who had their panel last night. I actually helped coordinate that one as well with Vic Devone Jr. That we talk about these spaces at FANIME, MagWest, MagFest, SAC Anime. Like, we really try to make sure that we present these things to the table, so then that way, you know, conventions make change. Now, shout out to FANIME, and I said this last night, but like, you guys do your best to make sure that this is a visible conversation, that you're making changes throughout the convention to be more accommodating to your guests, because that's important. Like, you're bringing people into your home and you want to make them comfortable, right? So like, of course, you're going to make changes based off of things that are reasonable, like reasonable accommodations, essentially. So like, I just want to shout you guys off to that. But unfortunately, there's areas where there's still like people are blind. So for example, like with this image of a noose here, as you guys see on the screen over here, which I'll bring up and right meow.
Right meow.
There's a noose there, and that's in a NASCAR space. I can't remember the driver's name, but basically that NASCAR driver came to work ready to race, ready to practice, and then there was a noose in their garage. And it's like, you would think NASCAR, it's just, you know, racing cars. Like, there shouldn't be any pressure from being racist and all that stuff. You know, to, what's the word I'm looking for? There shouldn't be any struggle at all, because it's like, how you race should be the way to go about.
Right.
But in the end, there's always going to be someone who's obviously really jealous, and they're going to intimidate you, and they do not care. They will make sure that they will know that you are the colored person that you are in that space, and that's awful. So
I mean, I think things like this happen when people find an escape from the struggles and the realities that they have. You know, they build something, and other people appreciate it and join, right? And then you have individuals who feel like it's okay to gatekeep, and then depending on how the culture is in your country, the reasons for those gatekeeping, like, it really just becomes, well, what reason can I find to keep you out of this space? And if you're looking around and you're seeing that most of the people that have built this space with you are white, then it becomes really easy to target somebody for the color of their skin. I think something similar happens in anime spaces or in gamer spaces. You know, I won't say like the royal we, all of us, but I feel like a lot of us turn to gaming, and a lot of us turn to anime as an escape, as a way to live fantasy, as a way to live in this alternate universe that we get to create, and appreciate the characters that we see. And sometimes if you're not used to seeing something, then it becomes like automatically othered, or you feel as if you should be against that thing, when the reality is you don't have to. We can all come together and appreciate things and build like an even better experience for one another. So when we're talking about representation within this space matters, it's because the actions that you take in this space really do translate to how you start interacting with people of color outside of this space.
And that's exactly what we're going to address right now. Like, you know, a Black model who received racist criticism for anime cosplay and won't stop her from doing what she loves. So she's going to keep cosplaying, but, you know, we got trolls on the internet. I don't know if trolls are outdated, but we got trolls. We got Lords, because we can't cuss on here because it's an all age presentation, but we got Lords all over the place, from like, you know, the butt cracks of 4chan to Reddit forums to, you know, even your everyday like Facebook pages. Like there's always going to be someone who disagrees and they're going to try to make a joke out of you to say that what you're doing is wrong. People are going to be out there to make you wrong. But also there's going to be, don't worry, there's also the duality that there's going to be people out there who just always going to like root for you. So, but yeah, like just keep in mind, like there's women and cosplayers and folks who are people of color and Black who always get harassed, who always get a bunch of like unsolicited comments of what they're doing wrong, especially when in the Black cosplay space, which is awful. Like, you know, you can't cosplay as that person because Hinata isn't Black. Hinata isn't Black. So, you know, you're always going to hear that type of dialogue. And then unfortunately, we had Darian Hunt a while back ago who was shot in the back for cosplaying as Mugen from Samurai Champloo, which is like, he's just running around with like, you know, a fake sword and like a big robe, and like someone thought that was threatening because they didn't understand that what he was doing. And so like the cops came out and they shot him. And
I mean, and just like the narrative that they try to spin on this was that, you know, he was like wildly lunging and like attacking them, and they thought he was like being aggressive. And the reality of the situation was that he was just enjoying himself.
Yep.
And when he was confronted by the police, tried to explain himself and tried to leave. They shot this man in the back 6 times.
How are you going to get lunged? How are you going to lunge at the cops and then got shot in the back? Like that doesn't line up.
It really doesn't. And I think when we start coming out more mainstream, getting used to seeing Black people enjoying themselves in public spaces. Just enjoying yourself.
Just enjoying yourself.
Just enjoying yourself in public spaces.
You know, we all of the cosplayers like go through a process of like, you know, going to FANIME, and we'll use FANIME as an example since we're all here today.
We're all here.
We go through the process of making sure that our weapons get safety tagged. I can't remember what the process is called off the top of my head, but you get it safety tagged and say like, this is not a real weapon. Every weapon gets or weapon presenting tool gets inspected. Say it, V. Inspected. And you know, it's one of those things that we do our best to create the safe environment, but sometimes that there are folks who just don't get that and they'll think otherwise, and they don't understand the difference. Sometimes that there's people who just, you know, dress up as things, but also at the same time,
dress up.
Darian is obviously a person of color.
Yeah.
And this wasn't about him dressing up as anything, because this was more about someone being uncomfortable by the fact that the way that he looked was a threat.
Yeah.
And that's something that we want to diminish in our society, that Black people, brown people, POC folks, you are not a threat. You know, oh, it's called peace bonding. Casa said it's peace bonding. That's what it's called. But anywho, but yeah, like going on to the fact that like he was just presented, he can't control it, but he is a POC man, and so he was the one who got shot.
Yes. And then the other point, the final point I think for this slide really is recognizing that Black people and people of color are already facing so much discrimination out in the world that can literally be deadly, that asking or expecting to be respected in these spaces that we are contributing to, I don't think is, you know, unreasonable. I think we all have the grace and the space to help each other get through some of the hard times that we face out in the world.
Absolutely. All right, so moving along.
Hey, look, Mr. Popo's trying different tactics.
Look how big.
He was like, oh, you don't want to talk about me yet?
Hey, I know. Look at me. Look at me.
Look at me now.
Look at me now. Look at me now. I'm getting paper. Oh, look at me now. Hey, look at me. Okay, sorry. We will definitely get to Mr. Popo, I promise. Also, for those who are like, what's a gollywog? Little homie on the corner right there. That's a gollywog. So, I mean, let's just quickly just keep note that little dude on the little corner right there is a little gollywog. And was very popular, and everybody wanted them in their very white home.
In their very
so home. How do we overcome this? So we can't just like say we need inclusion, we need this, we need inclusion, we need this. We gotta, you know, if we want something to change, unfortunately, we're us as Black people, we gotta do it ourselves, right? And even if it's with the intent of like, usually the intent of making changes, like I'm really passionate of this area of my life, I'm gonna just do something about it, right? So for example, let's use King Vader as an example. Shout outs to King Vader. Been making content for I think since 2014. So he's a youngin.
He's a youngin. You know, I love to see. I feel so old. 30, I swear. But I'm looking at all these children with the technological skills to make videos. Like, boggles my mind. I'm like, how are you guys doing these things? But you have kids who, like, I say they're kids. They're, you know, early 20s, late teens, and they are absolutely killing it. I'm talking making groups in schools that I had never heard of. Like, now it's commonplace to have an anime group in school.
Yeah.
An anime club.
Yeah.
Like, where was that in my ancient times? It didn't exist. And
Yeah.
this is like what is turning out all of these incredible creative people.
Yeah, like the content that's been coming out, and King Vader ripples into other content creators such as Mark Phillips, such as Steph Pierre, and also Minnie Cohn, I believe is his name, and they all do a bunch of videos. I think they live in SoCal, so they all just know each other, but like, you know, it ripples. So like he's done all these like spoofs and these hip hop spoofs on anime, and he just really loved anime, and so that's where he kind of got started. So if you've seen his, like, you know, My Hero Academia spoofs, his recent, my favorite one is when he did the Batman with the boys crossover, and like that was great. So like, you know, he kind of started doing that. Let's go ahead and talk about Dart Shitagio.
Right? I love them. I swear they picked the most like complicated name. It's like D''art and then it's like Stagio.
Oh my bad, I totally brutally.
Stagio.
Yeah.
The Stagio, because it's like the art studio, but like mixed between like Japanese and like French and English. It's interesting.
Okay.
But they are a Black studio in Japan, animators who used to work on incredible shows in their own right and who are now contributing to pieces of art like Yasuke.
That's right. And they also did Castlevania. We all know Castlevania.
Castlevania.
That's an old video game went to an animated show, and it's like the sequences are amazing. And it's like, you know, don't get me wrong, not to discredit any other animators out there, but like, you know, Black people are really coming in there being like, yeah, we're going to come into this space and we're going to come in here and show that what we can do. And also we need to make sure that we look more like Black people in animation. Like that's so important. All right, we're going to talk about BlerdCon in a second, but Danielle McRae, she is Lady Blerd alumni, been on the show, friend of the show. She is fantastico, love her so much. And she's done voices from Final Fantasy VII, fan fave.
Yeah, let them know who, she's a voice actress.
She's a voice actress. Voiceover, yes. We love us some Danielle.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, and she's done like, you know, from League of Legends, Final Fantasy VII, Skullgirls, like you name it. She's all over the map.
World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft. Yes.
She's doing the whole thing.
She is doing the whole thing, and she keeps it, you know, she keeps it goth. I really like her style.
I know,
you know? Like,
it's so great. She hits all those like 90s feels for me. I'm like, thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, mamas. And then, you know, in the nerdcore sector, let's talk about Samus. Like, Samus is a nerdcore artist, PhD, by the way, hip hop artist with a PhD.
She's a real doctor.
Really transcending past barriers and, like, you know, just making an example for the girls. My favorite album by her is Pieces of Space. Really, she really dives into her whole dilemma of being a Black woman who loves anime, but she doesn't see anything that relates to her. Like, she talked about a line with being like, there's a Tifa's, but like Tifa doesn't look like me, and that's another Final Fantasy reference, you know. Let's keep moving. Oh, BlerdCon.
Wait, we can't just skip over BlerdCon.
Sorry if anime. I'm sorry if you guys like bleep out this whole section because we're promoting another. But BlerdCon happens in July. Like, so BlerdCon is another convention that is focused on a community aspect of like, you know, bringing all Black fans together. Don't get me wrong, like we're not going to kick out anybody who isn't Black from BlerdCon, but you know, if we don't find spaces for ourselves, we're gonna find the space to be ourselves. And so, you know, it's kind of like one of those things. It's a cry to say like this is an action that we're doing because we don't feel like we belong. And let's shout out to other like local conventions. FANIME, I'm so sorry. Like, I know you guys are listening. You'll be like, I'm gonna cut out this whole section. How dare they? How dare they talk about another convention during this convention? No, you guys are very inclusive as hell. Like, oh, excuse me. But it doesn't hurt to talk about other inclusive conventions such as SAC Anime, KenyobiCon. Like, you know, we're talking from the local aspect, and like, you know, it's great to see that BlerdCon does it too, just to make sure like we are talking about Black nerds, which is BlerdCon is a mesh between Black nerds.
Yeah, FANIME, you never have to worry. You're literally my first con. Like, you have my heart.
Yeah.
You have my heart.
You guys.
Online at FANIME.
I mean, I guess FANIME has my heart because I had to take the bus from Monterey to San Jose. So that was a whole 2-hour trip to get from one place to another when I was like 16. So
the love is real.
The love is real. We've been here. We've been in it. Okay, so let's move along. And then we're creating more content and reflective content as well. Like, let's talk about Destiny Senpai from getting anime, her glow up in Crunchyroll. She is
talk about trajectory.
I
Someone
know.
who's like really setting the freaking bar.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, babies. Like,
let's go. Yeah, she's been doing this podcast exclusively about anime, exclusively about covering all this stuff. I remember her cute episode about Carol and Tuesday. Like, I'm like, oh my God, she's just the sweetest little daisy listening to her, you know. And then, you know, we got Navy Montel, Blerdicorn.
He's the blurred uncle that I like always wanted and never had.
Yeah.
He's amazing. He hosts like incredible interviews on his Instagram. He goes live. He just finds other Black creatives, other Black cosplayers, and he's just about the culture. He's for that life. I reached out to him personally about even doing this presentation, and he was just like, whatever support you need, let me know. Like, whatever research you need help with, let me know. Like, so he's really like, the community is there with him. Like, I'm so blessed.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, he's such a doll. Like, I've been watching some of his stuff and he's just so excited. Like,
it's been great.
And he said that he's a 50-year-old man who just started cosplaying 4 years ago. And like, that really shows with being a Black person in anime and gaming world, like how apprehensive we are about just like trying to step into this space.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like I faced a lot of flack, you know, when someone was just like, oh, like that's white people stuff. You know, and I'm just like, well, it's like actually with Japanese, but whatever. You know what I mean? But that's like, that was a lot of what the backlash was in Black culture for a long time.
yeah.
You know? And then now it's like we're having people come out and start to embrace a lot of these things and like even realize that they are probably nerds and that they just never accepted the mantle of it.
Absolutely.
I was talking to my brother, he's 10 years older than me. He makes music. He loves all of these like 90s video games, 80s video games, things from his childhood. I'm like, dude, you're a super nerd. Like, you know about all these things. You're into wrestling. Like, you're a total blerd. You just don't claim it, which is silly.
Yeah, absolutely silly. Let's talk about some local guy, the rap nerd.
The local guy.
Local guy. You guys probably know the rap nerd from doing the Nerdcore Cyphers. Like,
Seriously.
he is a teacher. He's a producer. He is like a straight up like musician. He plays bass.
Ooh.
He plays bass and he's a DJ. Like, he's just like a man of music when it comes, but he loves nerdy shit. He loves he loves all the nerdy stuff. Nerdy-ish. He loves all the nerdy stuff that comes in, and he's doing BarCon. He does all the SAC anime stuff. He's actually the one who made me feel like more like a person in the space, and was and basically enabled me to be like at the spot right now. So like, you know,
I thank him for that, because I wouldn't, like, you're such a great mentor. Like, you really are. You guide me through a lot of these spaces that I didn't get to experience before, and I can see the reverence in your face for a lot of the people that we talk about here, and it just makes me even more excited to be like, okay, let me go check out what they're doing. So thank you, director, for giving me the.
And then like their Sailor Moon fan club hosted by Victoria L. Johnson. She talks about just all the Sailor Moon content. Like, you know, Sailor Moon is an old anime, and it was probably our inaugural anime for a lot of us. Like, you know, some of us are just like, Crystal, why not the Jersey accents with Serena? You know, like, so you know, so like they go into that. You can follow, you know, definitely follow Victoria at Miss Old School with a K, to listen to their podcast. And last but not least, let's talk about cosplay. So I see all these beautiful women doing anime cosplay, Black women just doing it. Favorite senpai, June here, Izzy Brando, but like we don't talk about the men who do it. And like let's give a shout out to Jarvis White, who's also local, does all the cosplay, does a lot of like gatherings and stuff like that. And so like, you know, Jarvis just comes through just like unapologetically him. His background is military, masculine, and it's like one of those things where it's like, you know, if you're masculine, you're like, I don't know about doing cosplay, but he just does it and kills it, you know? I met him actually as a Bleach character.
Wigs, makeup.
Makeup, wigs, you know?
Yes, live the fantasy.
You know, Naruto running. So yeah, and the whole point of us bringing us the overcome section is the fact that like no one asked us to do this. Like no one asked. And
future little kids ask. This is what I feel like. I feel like little kids in the future be like, why did this exist? And that's why people create them. Like you create the things you wanted to see when you were little. So like you were totally asking. I wanted this. I didn't realize it could exist. And I'm so happy that like people make it.
Yeah. We wanted to be just more visible in these spaces, and to show like there's more than just being white passing and just, you know, hanging out and we didn't want to be gatekept anymore. All of these folks, I'm sure, has experienced some sort of gatekeeping, you know, of a severe degree about participating and feeling like they belong in these spaces, you know. And like what's really sad about the other side of it is that sometimes even our own communities like shun it. And so we want to make sure that there is versatility, and to show that like, you know, we want to be seen. That's the whole thing. And with that being said, like anime, like because of these folks and many, many, many more, we are starting to see better representation of Black people in animation. We're able to see better representation of Black people in video games. You know, let's talk about the Black folks in Castlevania. Like the guy who I can't remember if he's the Beast Forager. Those in the chat, please correct me. But like, you know, he is a Black man that summons beasts. And like he doesn't have the big lips and the crazy big eyes. He just looks like a person. He looks like a human. Let's talk about, you know, the person in the recent episodes of Attack on Titan, where they were during the conflict. This is the last season, but like, you know, he looked like he was Black, and also being voiced by a Black man. Zeno Robinson, by the way, you know, like took over that voice. Isaac the Forge Master. Thank you so much. But yeah, like it's just like one of those things, like it's so important to have presence there for better and improvement of representation, because this is what makes our personalities, you know, because a lot of us did go from like after school to watching Toonami, and we love anime because it was our escape from like normal everyday life, but we just want to make sure that we're properly seen as, you know, Black people and not some savage person.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it looks like we are getting kind of to a close. We're almost down to our last 12 minutes. Almost. So almost. We got some treats, by the way, but just stay tuned. Like, this is how you guys can follow us.
You were cute.
Yeah, I know, we're adorable. Oh my God. Kylie sometimes like beats me with the makeup game. I'm not gonna
really
lie.
don't.
So you can follow Kylie on at, you know, actually talk about yourself.
Okay. So who am I? You
Who are you? Tell the crowd who you is.
I'm an old lady.
No, get out.
No, my name's Kylie Too Smart. I'm Kylie Too Smart pretty much everywhere. Instagram, Facebook. I enjoy knitting, crafting. I consider myself like a huge blerd. I grew up like without television, so that's kind of like my experience. Like I grew up in Hawaii, so I did have, like, I was heavily steeped in anime culture. You know, my friends were, you know, watching Sailor Moon and Link. That's what they wanted to play. So it was like I had these references. I had all of these references and all of this like peripheral knowledge without actually seeing a lot of the shows. And I didn't watch them until I was older, and I didn't get access to them until like maybe, you know, middle school. I didn't start playing video games until like high school. college now. And so like seriously, when I talk about like V being kind of like a mentor for me, it's great because I'll be experiencing new things and like talking to her and being like, okay, so like what do you suggest next? But like I'm still old school, so like I've got like the mangas. I totally read all of those. I have like the comics. The fandom is real. We're still like sci-fi. I love all of that stuff. And so there's things that I'll talk about where she'll be like, what did that come from?
Yeah,
like,
that came out of pocket, but all right.
I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Serenity? Like you never watched Firefly? Like, excuse me, what? So we have those moments. So yeah, that's what's going on with me. I really want to get into cosplay. I love makeup. I love the fantasy.
Yeah, you've been killing the Kakashi looks. Yeah.
Oh, Kakashi, that was my fave.
Yes, ma'am.
He's my boo.
And then you can find me. I'm sometimes V. I know I have some family in the chat right now, so they probably know me as Veronica, but I am sometimes V and Veronica. I am a musician, podcast host of 2 podcasts. I'm just all over the place, to be honest. So you can find me at sometimes _V. So you can find me there. Also, listen to our catalog of the podcasts. Like, so we have like 100 episodes already.
Well, we've been doing it for a year.
We've been doing it for a year. So Lady Blerds podcast is like kind of its own little network, but there's Lady Blerds Sings the Blues, which is a play on Lady Sings the Blues by Billie Holiday. So please check us out at Lady Blerds podcast, SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Pods, my sister podcast of Don't Cast and Drive, where I interview a lot of artists. And you can also find us on YouTube. We just finally got our YouTube shiitake mushrooms together. So like we're ready.
Super ready.
We're ready. Now, going back to the screen real quick, you know, we've been really neglecting a certain subject here.
Have we?
Yeah.
I feel like we're good. I feel like we covered,
I mean, look at homie. He just popped up. What's up, Popo?
What's up, Popo? Back on.
You put your clothes back on.
The show wasn't quite
He
working.
has the pandemic padding.
Oh, pandemic padding.
Yeah. So, you know, like, so let's go ahead and like, you know, bring up, you know, we'll pass the questions part. And if you guys have any questions, please outline them in the chat as we talk about Mr. Popo. So, okay, let's talk about Popo real quick. Some quick facts. Some factual information.
Things you didn't know just by looking at Popo's
because we were also focused on Goku and Vegeta's love triangle with power that you guys were not paying attention to Popo.
You should have been.
You should have been. So he is a guardian's servant. He is also
he's a deity. He's a god in his own right.
Right? Like he is a god in his own right. But at the same time, it's weird because his role is being a servant to Kame or a servant to the next guardian of the lookout. And don't get me wrong, like Kame never showed that he was being rude or abusive, but like Popo has been conditioned to always be a servant to whoever it is. He's never had a chance to get a promotion. He's never gotten his 30% raise, which we all deserve living in the Bay Area. I can't imagine the capital gain. Okay, sorry, I'll stop.
Wow.
And then, you know, his loyalty to the Guardians is over 9,000. Oh my God, old anime joke, but it is true. It's true. So, you know, some damage control that happened with, so obviously Popo looks like a gollywog, which we addressed before is a problem to minstralism, right? And go on, Kylie.
Yeah, so gollywogs were basically a doll type character. It was, I want to say it was written in like the late 1800s. And it was basically just based off of minstrels, which was basically, you know, a theater thing, which was a role that was created by, I want to say he was like a French man, but he would basically go on stage in blackface and mimic Black people.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you get the whole Jim Crow. That was the name of the character. So when people talk about Jim Crow laws, they think they're talking about like a specific person, but Jim Crow is actually just a theater caricature persona of a person in blackface who basically just talks about how he likes working all day and he's like singing and chucking and jiving, and it's really terrible and problematic.
Yeah.
And then you have this imagery being used throughout the years and being changed throughout the years into all of these different little iterations and characterizations. And so when I tell you, like I said, I didn't have regular access to television. So when I did actually start watching Dragon Ball Z, or just Dragon Ball, I had a huge problem with Popo. And just looking at him, like, just made me so upset. But then, like, the more I learned about his character, the even more I got upset. Like, he legitimately can go anywhere in the world, right, and do anything, and yet he's gardening. He's working the field, and it makes me so mad. And he has a carpet to fly around on that he doesn't need because he's got magic in his own right, and he can just make things happen. And so to see his character, like, really just getting me hot sometimes.
Yeah.
Free Popo. Popo needs to free himself.
Yeah.
Free your mind.
The rest will follow. Okay. Okay. In vogue for those who need to know.
Yes.
But yeah, it's very similar to the loyalty from, if you guys watch Django with Jamie Foxx and Leonardo DiCaprio and Samuel L. Jackson, like, it's very similar to the loyalty that that the house slave had to do that. And yes, Django was very, very embellished and very for Hollywood. So I'm not going to say that Popo was like the same character, but the overtones still remain. Bernice, by the way, had actually a very good point. So I will comment on what you just said, that growing up in Asia, that Bernice didn't have the preconceived notion that the parents was supposed to be for Mr. Popo. Bernice grew up in the Philippines and saw Mr. Popo as a South Asian, which South Asian colorism is definitely a thing.
Well, I was going to say South Asian colorism is absolutely a thing. When I was talking about, like, Imperial Japan and how Japan had taken on the role of colonizers. So in America, our frame of reference would be, you know, white superiority complex. For animation, for anime, you would think it would be like Japanese superiority complex. So basically, anytime you have colonizers, right, you need to have a reason or a justification, some way to validate the reasons why you're taking over these lands. So you portray people who are darker skinned as savage and needing to be coddled and needing to be taught culture. And so a lot of these still painful, prickly, terrible associations that I have for Mr. Popo coming from a Black woman, I definitely could see coming from any other person of color looking at this who have experienced any kind of colonialism in their history.
Absolutely. And this is very valid from both Bernice and Irene. So thank you so much for bringing attention to that. So questions. Those in the chat, is there any last questions or contributions before we start to close this out? It's been a pleasure. Super pleasure that FANIME has had us here. And I see the comments that the staff are just like wilding out about this presentation. So thank you guys so much for appreciating it. This is our first time going debut with a convention. So like we are excited to bring you guys more content for the years to come. So like this is very exciting for us. And thank you so much for giving us a space and understanding that the space is needed for these conversations. But yeah, I'll give you guys another 30 seconds to be, I know that you guys are probably listening to this and there might be a little bit of a delay. So just, you know, we're ad-libbing.
Thanks for all the love.
Thanks for all the love.
We need to have an outro song.
We need an outro song. We're
almost there.
All right, so it looks like everyone's complimenting us, and thank you so much for all the love.
Yes, all the compliments you give us, we give back to you like 100-fold, 10-fold. I hope that we inspired you guys to like show up fully in whatever space you're at, comfortable as yourself, because we are the ones who make it happen for younger generations that follow.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I guess we almost out this because we can't cut.
We're out of this place of business.
Bye.